Hi, and welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Today's special guest is lawyer Peter Lamprey, and we're going to be talking about some of the interesting things that are happening with regards to buying and selling real estate and some of the legalities involved that have changed as a result of COVID-19. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I guess right off the bat, I want to ask you, we're 3 months into COVID-19. The business of real estate, it was declared as being an essential service. So it's continued on. Your business has continued on as well. But what changes are you seeing that you can think of off the top of your head in processing and closing deals? Is there anything that stands out?
Several things have changed. For example, we have made a number of physical changes to my office, such as installing plexiglass to keep people safe from each other, enforcing social distancing, the use of wipes to wipe down, signing desks and chairs and pens and so on. And also an increase in the number of meetings we have by means of technology such as Zoom and Skype and Google Duo and so on. And so our own office procedures have changed. Also, we have noticed that there have been a number of changes in the way money gets moved. For example, most of the banks have closed several branches so that we are now obliged to send someone to another branch, which means getting in the car and driving. And then standing outside the bank, sometimes for up to an hour and a half, just to get into the bank to transact business.
Right.
Also, we find that moving money around has, as a result, taken longer. And so it has become more of a challenge to get transactions completed in a timely manner.
Mm-hmm.
So
now,
those
Peter, let me ask you a question here. This is an interesting scenario we find ourselves in, where we all would agree the cliche is, I call it a cliche, but it's the reality is that business as usual is out the window. However, the reality at the same time is that there are still transactions that are bound by legal contract. And so any of these challenges that you might face where, quite honestly, for example, where one of the parties in the transaction that are critical to the success of the transaction, for example, a bank which may have imposed its own protocols in place, has that forced your window to turn around the transaction to be longer? Or what happens if you just miss the mark and now you're in breach of a closing date or a significant milestone? How does that impact all of the players in the transaction?
Well, first of all, yes, it takes longer for us to sometimes receive money from commercial mortgage lenders because they have fewer staff and maybe more staff are working from home. So that's a little less efficient. It takes longer for them to transact business. And we have had one or two cases where we did not get money in time in order to complete a transaction. But for the most part, we have found that even though we have had these challenges in getting transactions closed on the day scheduled for it, we've been able to do it, number one. But in cases where we haven't, people have been very, very understanding and patient, and people have been prepared to extend a closing date for a day or two, depending upon the needs at the time. And so I have not had any transactions not close as a result of the changes in the economy and in procedures due to COVID-19.
Let me ask you this question. Let me just jump in, and then Michael, I know you've got something that you want to get out. Real quick, though, you said people have been understanding. People have been empathetic, if you will, to the reality. What about these institutions that we always recognize are the slowest to adapt, or they're very slow to position themselves? Have you struggled with the institutions themselves? And I don't need you to name names, but in general, have the institutions been slow to react, or are they sort of been like, nope, this is the way we're going to do things and we're not budging from our policy and we don't care that we're missing your closing date?
We haven't found much of that, Arif, when it comes to financial institutions. Yes, they have changed their procedures, and I'm talking now about the local branches of the chartered banks, trust companies, and credit unions. We also recognize that the people on the front line at those places are struggling too, and they are doing their best to make sure that we get things done. We've actually had meetings, I think some of the other law firms have had as well, with some of the local branch managers to discuss ways in which they could improve their service. And so far, with those discussions have had a very, very sympathetic ear. How much change they are able to do institutionally, we don't know. We have found that some institutions have been much better than others at reacting to the new reality. And even if we do return to a state of no pandemic, I do think that some of the changes that we've seen implemented in the banks and other places will remain in the foreseeable future. But to get back to your earlier point about what happens when a transaction doesn't close as a result of the movement of money, well, a party is entitled to say that a deadline is a deadline is a deadline. And if a party does not meet a closing deadline, they are in breach of contract. And the consequences of that are potentially very serious and could involve lawsuits. But as I had also said, we haven't seen anybody take a hard line when it comes to a situation like that. Everybody knows that we need to get the deals done, even if it's not on time. So that's very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I mean we're seeing the flow continue on the residential side of real estate, but the commercial side has taken more of a hit, and I'm thinking in particular with regards to leases. And I know that the government has come forward with a number of programs. There's certainly a lot of confusion. My wife works with a lot of for a commercial real estate property management company. They're trying to make heads and tails of a lot of the things that are coming forward from the government. One of the key things is understanding the difference between deferral and forgiveness with regards to rents, because let's face it, a lot of companies just aren't able to make the rents right now. Right. What would you have to add to that? Are you involved in any commercial things? Are you seeing anything as a result of this? That's
and Peter, I'm gonna let you gather your thoughts and put a great answer to that together. We're gonna go to break real quick, and when we come back, Mike, a quick refresher on the question, and Peter, jump right in to addressing that issue. Stick with us and Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
When I felt scared, United Way had my back. 5 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom with 4 children, including one with special needs, and I was facing divorce. I needed a job fast and to figure out how to help my kids and myself through a difficult transition as gently as possible. With United Way funding, my kids were matched with mentors who provided guidance, attention, and a listening ear, which helped as I dealt with legal details and took job preparation classes. Now I see myself as a successful single mom who taught my kids how to become better, not bitter. My name's Kim, and donations to United Way Simcoe Muskoka helped change my life. Thank you.
to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and our guest is Peter Lamprey, a real estate lawyer in Barrie. Peter, Mike had a great question for you about the commercial transaction. Take it away, Mike.
Yeah, with regards to commercial and even residential rental transactions, those two terms, deferral and forgiveness, seem to be getting a little combobulated with one another. And even with regards to some of the incentives and programs that are coming forward from the government, I was just hoping you could put a little bit of clarity on the difference between the two with regards to being a renter.
Sure. A deferral of rent is nothing more than a loan by the landlord to the tenant of the amount of rent that is not being paid immediately. And whether or not that deferral carries with it a deferral charge, which would be effectively interest on the loan or not, is between the parties. A forgiveness, of course, is just that. The landlord does not collect the rent at all. Hopefully, they have made a calculation that it is better in the long run to take a little bit of hopefully short-term pain in order to preserve that tenancy relationship.
Yeah. So Peter, I mean, I think it's incumbent upon everybody involved in what's going on to recognize and be compassionate that, there are people who are challenged. There are people who are suffering, both in from the perspective of the tenant or people in their personal lives and their residences. They may have lost their job or they may be on an unemployment insurance. So too, quite possibly, is the landlord. Not all landlords are large public corporations and massive conglomerations with, seemingly endless amounts of cash reserves. Some of them are mom and pop landlords as well. I think you highlight a very important point, though. A deferral is not forgiveness. When times come back to the new normal, whatever that may be, you now owe both your current rent and the rent that is in arrears. And that can also impact your credit in terms of being able to acquire or access future financing, because at the end of the day, it's still a note on your file at the time of discharge or a mortgage information statement that said you missed 2, 3, 4 months of rent.
That's true.
Things to consider. Yes.
And the rent may become due at a time when the tenant has not been able to return to a normal level of business and may not be able to afford to pay back that fairly substantial amount of money, which I imagine it would be in most cases.
I think it's fair to say, though, that we haven't seen COVID before, but from your professional experience, is there an example that you can relate to where there has been a deferral where you've seen sort of an outcome that wasn't necessarily as anticipated?
I haven't seen anything like that in my practice, but I can fully expect that a tenant faced with that, a commercial tenant faced with that, may simply decide to shut their doors and declare bankruptcy. For a residential tenant, that's not necessarily an option. Everybody needs a roof over their head.
And I think that the protections are significantly higher from a court's perspective, protecting that everybody needs a roof over their head. So there's a lot more forgiveness or opportunity to redeem. Mike, sorry, I cut you off earlier, though. Go ahead.
No problem. And it's a long road to recover, and it'll require some compassion and some of that forgiveness for sure. I wanted to ask you a more general question, and this is almost more as a business person yourself, Peter, than as a lawyer. But you've seen, and we've all seen, I've seen our industry shift more towards technology, doing a lot more things online. Certainly COVID-19 has put the pressure on us to utilize that technology. I'm just curious to hear your opinion on whether or not going forward, this is something we'll revert back to where we were, or is this a pivotal point we've now moved into a whole different era and maybe just with regards to your industry, do you see changes coming about technologically as a result of COVID-19?
Those changes are here now, and we are not going to go back to the way it was. To some degree, there will be a reversion to what we used to consider normal, but the tide has turned, and you are going to see law firms rely on technology for virtual meetings much more on a going forward basis.
No.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I think that we are going to, well, first and foremost, there's another area of my life where we talk about technology on a daily basis. And the fact of the matter is that you mentioned, you used the word earlier, Peter, inevitable. And the fact of the matter is that whether it was COVID or whether it was something else, the fact of the matter is that companies and people and professionals embracing technology and embracing the virtual commute was inevitable. It just so happened that COVID was the catalyst. The fact of the matter is that there are some of us who have been in our practices longer than others who got used to or accustomed or didn't feel like evolving with the times. I think it's important, though, to stipulate that going virtual does not mean a decrease in level of service. We're proving right now that we can be very personable with each other. We can see each other's body language. We can read each other's tone of voice. We can make sure that the documents are signed digitally. Just because we're going to improve, increase or utilize technology more, would you agree that the personal touch is still going to be as relevant as ever?
Well, I think it's always going to be important, Arif, because humans are social creatures, and we depend upon the feedback that we get when we meet with someone. And although you can, I think, with technology, achieve that with most types of sort of feedback you get from another person, eye contact, body language, the tilt of a head. Still, I think there will always be a place for physical meetings. So we're not, as I said, going to go back to the way we were. There will be much more of these virtual meetings, but I think that there will always be a need for those physical meetings face-to-face in the same airspace. And I find that is the case not just with any particular age group. One might say that seniors are more inclined to want to revert to the old ways, but my experience has been that that's not the case. I'm finding a level of comfort right across the board with meetings by technology, and a lot of people who are, say, in their 20s and 30s, who are just as resistant to technology as people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. So
I love it.
We will always.
I'm sorry. There's a bit of a delay there. I'm talking over you. I love that you said that, and I think we all know for a fact that the seniors have been the second fastest group, if not the fastest group, to embrace technology and social media. We got to go to a break real quick. We'll be right back with Peter Lamprey, real estate lawyer in Barrie, on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Don't go away.
Introducing the McLaren 50/50, an online raffle in support of the not-for-profit McLaren Arts Centre. This monthly draw is organized with the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, giving you a chance to win big. www.mac5050.com.
I'm Mallory, and I was walking home one night when an impaired driver hit me. He had been overserved in 2 bars before getting behind the wheel. If the servers would have called him a cab instead of serving him more alcohol, my life would be the same as what it used to be. I think servers play the biggest role in keeping us safe because it's up to them what state the person's in when they leave. Refusing service isn't personal, it's the law.
You're operating, Doc.
My brother dies, I'm gonna kill you.
I'm scared.
Get out of here, now. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna fight him.
He was a sociopath, completely in control. He said that wherever I went, he would find me. Show yourself! Come on! There you are.
The Matthews House Hospice Bucket List Lottery is now on. Time is running out. The grand prize draw is on July 1st. Tickets available online at mhh5050.ca and throughout South Simcoe. What's on your bucket list?
And we're back on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. Barry, Mike, we've got a fantastic guest, Peter Lamprey, real estate lawyer. Peter, I'm going to ask you a legal question, and I don't know how you're going to answer it. We're in an area where, as we talked about, a lot of virtual meetings and a lot of hands-off meetings, but one of the cornerstones or where a lender finds security is in being able to have an appraisal and being able to hold the appraisal company accountable for the quality or the accuracy of the report. And in today's age, many of our appraisals are going to either desktop only, or if the appraiser is showing up, it's more of a drive-by, and some appraisers are handing Ziploc bags with cameras in them through the door or leaving it on the doorstep with an instruction over the phone to the client to say, go take pictures of all of your rooms and hand that back out the door. Yep. My question is, what does that do in the relationship of a bank being able to hold the appraiser accountable for the accuracy of the appraisal? And, what happens if this goes to court?
Excellent question. Not a simple answer, but I will try. The appraiser themselves has to be comfortable enough with that kind of approach because they are, after all, putting their reputation on the line to the lender. I would like to see any appraiser who wants to take that approach to making at least part of their analysis remote or virtual, posted on their website, in their literature, and it would be advisable for them to make sure that any lender who proposes to rely on the appraisal is comfortable with that kind of approach. So having said that, the appraiser themselves is taking, I guess, the risk of any lack of detail, diligence, or professionalism in the approach. But I think that as long as they are comfortable with the results and they also make it clear that some parts of the appraisal may have to be redone if the lender is not comfortable with it, then although appraisals may take longer and maybe your financing condition periods are going to have to be longer in transactions than they were before, I think they'll still get the job done.
So I think what I'm going to ask you then is, I'm assuming that there's a whole bunch of disclaimers in the documentation or in the report that says something along the lines of ... to the best of the appraiser's ability, or ... to the best of our knowledge, we use the best information that was reasonably available. And at some point, it's up to the lender to assume that risk.
Well, some lenders will not feel comfortable in accepting that kind of disclaimer because they want the appraiser to essentially underwrite the information that the lender is relying on. So disclaimers will only go so far, and there are many court cases over the years over what is and is not an effective disclaimer. And we have seen that kind of issue arise with home inspections as well.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Mike, I'm going to break protocol here. I'm going to ask you a question. Peter made a comment that I think is very relevant, and that is it might be up to the real estate professionals, I'm paraphrasing, to ensure that there is a longer condition of finance date, not just the standard 5-day turnaround time, because certain things may take longer. How likely is it for that to happen in your side of the industry?
Well, we're seeing it, and I have to say we were even seeing it prior to COVID-19 because there's been many changes with the whole lending process over the last couple of years that have required a little more time in order to exercise all the checks and appraisals and approvals. And so we've gone from the standard 5-day to many realtors asking for 7 days. And built into that is always the opportunity on that day of, you may go to your realtor and say, I'm just not ready. Put an amendment in there and ask for an additional period of time to close. More often than not, the other side is going to give you that additional time if it's reasonable, a day or two. But you run the risk that maybe there's a backup offer waiting there and they'll let the deal die. and jump to that. Maybe they were just waiting for that opportunity because a better offer was promised after the fact. So,
Mike, I think you'd banked a question in the back, though. We've got about less than 2 minutes. Why don't you get it out there real quick?
I just wanted to ask Peter more of a, I guess it would be more of a general question. Certainly the level of caution and diligence within my industry has been raised as a result of COVID-19. And we touched on some of the concerns and cautions from a legal standpoint. There's a number of cautions and concerns that revolve around real estate during COVID-19. But I just want to ask you the question, Peter, in light of all of that, would you tell the people watching here today that they should maybe step away and wait till another time to make a purchase or sale? Or are you comfortable telling them that proceed, but with that caution and diligence?
59 seconds, Peter. The floor is yours, sir.
All righty. I didn't catch every word that Mike said, but I can say that I would not advise a client to decide to wait until another time until everything is blown over if they need to list or they need to buy, as long as they are taking appropriate precautions to make sure that visitors to their home airspace wear masks, wash up frequently, and respect social distancing. I think that every business can still be transacted.
Mike, I think that's a great way. Yeah, responsibly. I think seek the advice of a lawyer, a good lawyer, get good counsel from a realtor, get good counsel from your your mortgage broker, your financial advisor. Exercise due diligence, make sure your ducks are in order, don't get yourself caught, don't do knee-jerk reactions. That's what I'm hearing from you, and the rest, the market and the professionals will ensure your safe safe execution of the transaction. We're out of time, but Peter, as always, we love having you on the show. Thank you for providing fair and level guidance and feedback. But we look forward to having you back again to see what kind of a recap over the next couple of months on how COVID plays out. But I want to thank you for being on, Mike, Hitting Home with Mike and Arif here.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
September 20th, 2007.
January the 9th, 2003.
December 14th, 2013.
On August the 13th, 2009, Dr. Ian McGilvray and his team saved my life.
Too many people die every year waiting for an organ donation. Please, let's eliminate the wait list.
As an organ donor, you can save up to 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 others. Pledge a gift to life. You'll be glad you did.
When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local